Welcome, travelers of the multiverse. I bring you a special presentation of Mystic Miniatures Forge presents a storytelling episode. I often post on the Discord forum that I've taken the AOTP game and modified it into a kind of RPG. Today, I'll be describing the process in which I do that. And I figured, who best to do that with? But Nahiri the Lithomancer. So, looking for inspiration, this video is for you, Shri, and I figured what I'll do here is turn to the Magic the Gathering story for inspiration. The Magic story is so rich and in-depth that you could just basically take little snippets from it and generate a plethora of adventures just from things that have already happened. Now, there is a lot of canon and non-canon events that have been described in both the literature and comic books and other kind of web episodes and things that you can always take from. So let's look at the 3 against the Eldrazi. The storyline of Sorin, Nahiri, and Ugin's effort to trap the Eldrazi on Zendikar. So let's start with Nahiri's origin. So the scene takes place on the moors of Incineroar. Sorin Markov, a formidable vampire planeswalker, stands amidst the mist-shrouded moors of Incineroar. Suddenly, a flash of light illuminates in the darkness. And Nahiri, a young and bewildered core planeswalker, materializes before him. So after Nahiri's Planeswalker ignites for the very first time, she finds herself in an unfamiliar plane of Innistrad, disoriented and vulnerable. But instead of hostility, she is met with the enigmatic figure of Sorin Markov, whose presence radiates a mixture of curiosity and concern. So I have a very simplistic battle map with only really one section of elevation. Not really anything blocking line of sight too much. So this, for example, could just be one game, one instance, one battle. The interaction of Sorin meeting Nahiri. And that could just be, one play session, you sit down, you do that. That's one piece of this larger story. So here we go, right? So Sorin, right? So you could roll for initiative. Sorin gets the higher of the rolls. So Sorin moves, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. He turns to Nahiri, and in AOTP, there's no dialogue. There's no role-playing element. This is me taking the creative reins and really going with it. So what could Sorin say? So maybe he looks at this very unfamiliar person. He regards her with measured gaze. Another traveler from beyond the veil? You are not of this plane, are you? Nahiri's response. No. I am not. I am Nahiri, and I am lost. Can you help me? So Nahiri asks a question, can you help me? That could either be Sorin. You could then just, if you wanted to, so you as the game master, you could say, the person conducting the game could say, well, do you want to do this as a play session where they battle? Because most heroes, when they first meet, do cross swords when they do so. And, as a testament, you're battle forged, you're a good fighter, well, let's work together. That's the kind of thing that you see in movie and comic books all the time. And, do you want to do that as this is going to be one instance of the game where they fight together, and that's session 1. Session 1 would be they fight. But for me, I'm not going to get into really rolling a lot of dice. I'm not going to, summon creatures. I mean, you could do all that with, they summon their creatures, they have a big battle. There's a lot of hexes on the battlefield that would allow for such a thing to happen. But I figured for today's kind of use case scenario, I was going to describe how I go about doing that. So Nahiri says, I'm new here. Can you help me? So That's where the power of the 20-sided dice comes in. And maybe like a 1 through 10, it kind of be like a negative response. And 11 through 20 is a positive response. So if we roll, oh boy, it's a 7. So Sorin could regard Nahiri with suspicion, unsure of his intentions. Thus, we battle. And that's how you would kind of do it if you didn't want to know which way you wanted to go. Do you want to make this a battle? You know, session 1 is the battle here, or you just continue the story. I'm going to disregard that die roll and continue here. So Sorin recognizes Nahiri's vulnerability and offers his assistance, which is true to the story. He really takes Nahiri under his wing and starts to teach her about the multiverse. So Sorin, softening his demeanor. Lost, you say? Fear not, Nahiri. You have stumbled into the domain of Innistrad, but you are not alone. I am Sorin Markov, and I can guide you. Sorin's words carry a sense of reassurance, calming the young planeswalker's nerves as she takes in her surroundings. The moors stretch endlessly before them, the eerie tranquility juxtaposed against the danger lurking in the shadows. Nahiri. Thank you, Sorin. I don't know how I ended up here. It's all so overwhelming. Sorin gestures towards the horizon. Maybe he'd kind of move and, show them. Walk with me. There is much for you to learn about the multiverse, and I am willing to teach you. And maybe you could then do more kind of role play. It also depends on what your player base likes. Sometimes I'll turn to my players and I'll ask them, well, this is what the character says. What do you want to say? What do you think? What do you think would happen here? So maybe, I'll teach you. Roll the 20-sided die. Got a 14. So 1 through 10 is a negative response. Maybe Nahiri remains cautious, unsure of Sorin. 11 through 20, so I got a 14. Nahiri accepts Sorin's offer and recognizes the opportunity for knowledge and guidance, which is exactly what happens in the Magic the Gathering story. And Nahiri nods. Very well, Sorin. I will accompany you. Perhaps together we can unravel the mysteries of this plane and beyond. And so Sorin and Nahiri set off to the unknown. Their destinies intertwine by chance and circumstance. Little did they know that their encounter marks the beginning of a journey that will shape the fate of worlds. And why does it shape the fate of worlds? Well, because we're about to meet the Eldrazi. So that could be play session number 1. I didn't summon any hero creatures. I didn't really create too crazy of a battle map. It's just a couple little pieces of terrain pieces. This is mostly kind of just like a flat thing here that I can just quickly slide out of the way. And then, so now Sorin is teaching Nahiri about the multiverse. So we're very going to quickly just flip this over. And now, if you wanted to, that could be, so that'd be like play session number 1. And now we're going to move to like play session number 2. And it doesn't have to be play session. You could, sit down for 20 minutes or whatever to an hour, play that game out where Sorin versus Nahiri, they end up kind of either fighting, and then, because of that, they understand each other's powers and limitations, and they become better friends because of it. Or you could skip over it. It depends on what you want to do as the game master. As the game master, I wouldn't ever do anything that slows down the game, slows down the story. You want it to kind of just be smooth. You want to make sure your players are having fun. You don't want to make the game too easy. You want to keep players like kind of enticed as to what's going to happen next. You don't want them kind of just to sit back and kind of be bored, and you really want them to kind of sit on the edge of their seat, like wondering, like, well, we planeswalked. Well, where are we now? And you really want them to kind of just be invested in the story and become part of it. So now they planeswalk away. And let's see here. They're going to planeswalk. Big flash of light. They planeswalk. All right. So now let's populate this world. So they stand upon a desolate landscape of an unknown plane. And so let's start to populate this plane with some stuff. So let's see here. I'm going to throw out the so I'm also making use of the snow tile terrain. And really the snow tile terrain, I was going to use that as the example of the ingestation, how the Eldrazi eat and consume planes. And I figured since it's kind of like a white background on the edges and everything, that would kind of represent how the Eldrazi consume the mana. And what's left over? Well, nothing but blank. Nothing but blankness. Let's put the runner there because he's eating stuff. He's consuming the mana of the plane. Yeah, something like that. Right? Alright, so very simple map. I'm just using the original base game cardboard pieces, a little bit of Heroescape terrain. There are some other custom 3D printed Eldrazi waste tiles that I found on Thingiverse, and I'll be exploring those in the future with my customs. I had 3D printed a bunch of them, but I haven't done anything or much else with it yet. How it mechanically works and how do the Eldrazi harvest the mana of the plane. So, okay, so play session 1, it was Sorin versus Nahiri. Play session 2, introduce the Eldrazi. Sorin and Nahiri stand upon the desolate landscape of an unknown plane. Let's see, I'm also going to change the music because we're on like... Let's see here. Sorin and Nahiri stand there, a once vibrant ecosystem now ravaged by the insatiable hunger of the Eldrazi ruiner. The air is thick with the stench of decay, and the ground trembled beneath them as the Eldrazi's destructive force consumes everything in its path. And really, they look around, and these spaces are devoid of mana. The mana-rich rich land is really consumed. So amongst the chaos and destruction, Nahiri and Sorin see the destruction, a colossal form blotting out the sky as it devours the essence of the plane itself. In the face of such overwhelming power, a sense of urgency envelops two planeswalkers, and they realize the magnitude of the threat which it just has stumbled upon. So, like I said, there's no role-playing aspects to here. You could just, okay, here's where the players start, here's where the Eldrazi start. Okay, so Sorin wasn't, you being the game master, you kind of set the stage. You could have player 1 be Nahiri and player 2 be Sorin. And then, well, who's the Eldrazi? Well, that's the game master. The Eldrazi are going to be the game master. And so, player 1 takes a turn, player 2 takes a turn, and then the game master takes a turn. That completes the round, and then you just recycle and start all over. So Sorin could turn, and he said, "This cannot be allowed to continue. The Eldrazi must be stopped, lest they consume everything in their path." Nahiri, clenching her fists, "Agreed, Sorin, but how do we stand against such a formidable foe? We are just but two planeswalkers against an entire horde of Eldrazi." And maybe this is where you could also make use of the 20-sided die to kind of elicit positive and negative responses. 1 through 10, kind of a negative one. 11 through 20, something positive. So let's see what Sorin says in response. So 7, Sorin expresses doubt, acknowledging the enormity of their task. These two lonely planeswalkers against an entire swarm of Eldrazi? If Sorin was feeling more positive, or I rolled higher, he could have said something like, his resolve strengthens, and he's determined to find a way to combat the Eldrazi threat. And, how important is it that you put in all these 20-sided rolls and the role-playing? It's not. It's not important at all. It doesn't mechanically change the game, but what it does is it gets your characters invested into the action, the elements, the story. We're just using this as a vehicle of telling a good story. So Sorin, with determination, "We may be few in number, Nahiri, but we are not without allies. There are forces in the multiverse that would stand against stand with us against the Eldrazi. We need only seek them out. And as Sorin and Nahiri stand there and contemplate their next course of action, maybe a rift opens. And a swirling vortex tears the rift before them. And Ugin, the ancient dragon planeswalker, emerges. Ugin, surveying the devastation. Sorin, Nahiri, it seems you have stumbled upon quite the predicament. Now, okay, whoa, giant dragon planeswalker, like that's far out. You could also kind of use the 20-sided dice, like, well, how does Ugin feel about all this? So let's roll a 20-sided die. When you got a 14, that means it's a positive response. So Ugin exudes confidence. He's ready to lend his wisdom and power to the cause. Otherwise, you could have, if it's a negative response, Ugin could be kind of cautious, and it could be these two players versus Ugin and the Eldrazi. So it's like you have two kind of opponents, and two versus two. So that could be a battle there too. But Sorin, he says, Ugin, old friend, your timing could not be more fortuitous. We are faced with a threat unlike anything we've ever encountered before. These creatures, Ugin, stroking his chin thoughtfully, the Eldrazi. I feared this day would come, but fear not, my friends. We are not without recourse. Together we shall forge a plan to combat this menace and protect the multiverse from its insatiable hunger. And so, within the shadow of the Eldrazi's devastation, Sorin, Nahiri, and Ugin begin to concoct a plan that will bind the Eldrazi to Zendikar for a millennia to come. But as they work, a sense of foreboding lingers in the air, for the true extent of the Eldrazi's power remains unknown. And thus, what could this game look like? This game could be now player 1 Nahiri, player 2 Sorin, and player 3 Ugin versus this swarm of Eldrazi. We could, you think about 3 Planeswalkers versus 1, so this could be the Eldrazi Ruiner add-on from the Battle of Zendikar set. You think about where the back page of the Battle for Zendikar, where it's a modified version of this, where it's 3 players, so it's the 20 life one. You could do that, and then maybe once they fight and defeat this the Eldrazi here, they then planeswalk to Zendikar, and so this could be the end of play session 2. Now, these play sessions, you could do that 1 week is play session 1. The second week is play session 2. And then the last one, which we're going to get to next, will be play session 3. And so you almost have a month's worth of games. They're all independent of each other, but they tell the story. And this is how I turn my games into an RPG. I don't necessarily always sit down and just play the entire game through. I do it in little snippets. I do, okay, chapter 1 is this, chapter 2 is that, and chapter 3. And once you get through all 3 chapters, well, you know the story. This is the origin story of Nahiri the Planeswalker, and how she had met Sorin and Ugin and enacted the plan to align the Hedron network and trap the Eldrazi. So I'm just going to take a break for a second and set up the next map, and we'll start to enact the plan.